are inside smaller conference rooms, and you'll see them. They'll do the photo op, and they're all standing around a conference table, sit down, and then they invite the media to leave. This one's different. This setting looks more like the Security Council of the United Nations, with all of the participants around a circle with all their staff behind them. It's a huge meeting that they're having today in Turkey. Now, there's going to be some unhappy people in that meeting. Here's Donald Trump. Let's start with the soundbite, Dave, if you would. Donald Trump stating his unhappiness with the NATO allies.
He's been a great Secretary General of NATO. I'm not happy with NATO because of what they did with Greenland. And I'm not happy with NATO because of the fact that they didn't want to help us with the number one state sponsor of terror. That's Iran.
So that's Donald Trump sitting with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, saying, hey, you're a great guy. The rest of these members, you didn't want to help me with Greenland, which we would have been able to put the dome over the United States and Canada, North America. And we need Greenland for that. You don't want to help us with that. And then France is popping off for the last couple of days. We would have sent troops, armed troops, to fight the United States had they tried to take Greenland by force, which just reignited all of this in preparation of the NATO summit. Also saying, listen, we're fighting the number one state sponsor of terrorism. Iran cannot have a bomb. And you're saying we can't use the bases that we have in Europe that are co-run and controlled by the United States and our NATO partners. Donald Trump's not happy about that. In fact, he went on to talk about Spain, who's really not cooperated at all. They're not spending money. They're up to 2%. They're supposed to be at 5%. They're up to only 2%. And they're spending with NATO. He said, that's it. We're cutting them off. No more trade with Spain. We'll see how long that wants to stay. We'll see when they come back and ask. But we're not going to be carrying Spain and letting them be freeloaders as far as NATO goes. Now, couple things that you need to know this morning. The Iranians attacked another oil tanker going through the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, there's 65 some odd oil tankers with Iranian oil that are floating somewhere in the sea. They haven't reached port yet. They haven't been able to offload that oil. The United States has reconstituted the embargo back on Iranian oil. So, as you know, for the last 147 years, Iran has not been able to trade oil on the worldwide market because of U.S. sanctions. We lifted those sanctions for 60 days so they could sell oil to try to get this peace deal started. That has now gone away. The United States has now embargoed U.S. dollars being available for Iranian oil. So now they will have to go back to the black market if they can find anywhere to go. That cuts off the money coming into Iran, who had been decimated by the attacks earlier by the United States. So that's something that you need to know. And all this was predicated upon, and we'd seen it through the last couple of weeks or month or so, that ships would go through, the Iranians would threaten them or even take pot shots at them. Then the United States would respond back with a defensive military action. This one is a little bit different. This time they were firing at 3 different ships going through the Gulf. Now, the backdrop of all of this, just so you know, this is a week of mourning in Iran for the Ayatollah, who was taken out the very first day of the attacks between the joint operation, the United States and Israel. Normally, you immediately bury someone in their customs and traditions, in their religion, but for special people, they will hold on to that person again as they're under attack. They're not going to be able to bury him immediately. So now this is the week that they're having his funeral processions, and it's been an outpouring of mourning throughout the country for him, with hundreds of thousands of people taking to the street for his funeral procession. Iran had warned the United States, do not mess with us during this period of mourning and during the week of the funeral for the Ayatollah. Do not do anything. Well, the United States had been respecting that. Nothing had gone on, stood down. The ceasefire had continued. But in the middle of their mourning, they start taking shots at 3 different tankers going through the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. That was too much for the president, too much for the United States. They fire back, not in a defensive position, a posture this time, completely offensive, trying to bring as much damage as they can. Iran says, fine, we're responding back. 85 different targets from the U.S. and your Western allies are now going to be under attack by Iran. So the United States and Iran back into a Well, we can call it a shooting war if you like. The president says the ceasefire is basically over and the MOU is a waste of time. All of that coming out this morning in his pre-meeting press conference and talk with the media. He also went on to say that we'll see if the talks go on. He said that he called Iran scum, and he said the talks can go on, but I think they're a waste of time. And went on to call them other names as well. Clearly frustrated with the lack of understanding on Iran of the ceasefire. I mean, you asked us not to do anything during the week of mourning, but you do it anyway. I think this is hanging on by a thread, and that thread's about to break. But I think a couple things, as I see it this morning, I'll pass this along, and I'll open up the text message line for you right now if you want to comment. 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140. One of the things that we've talked about in this program, and it's 6:40, by the way, this morning on News Radio WRVA, one of the things I think that we need to understand is that the world doesn't share the same moral values or the same point of view as the West. It just doesn't. If you and I are in an argument and I go, you know what, we could stop this argument. Let's just shake hands and we'll stop the fighting. You would look at me as like, okay, blessed is the peacemaker that extends his hand to stop the fighting. That's the Western way of looking at things. The other parts of the world would look at my sticking my hand out, offering the olive branch as a sign of weakness, and would immediately double down their pressure or they're fighting with me because they see I'm willing to negotiate. I'm willing to walk away. I don't want to fight anymore. They look at that as cowardice. They look at that as a sign of weakness, and they pounce on that. And that's what we're seeing right now, I think, in Iran, is we're standing there posturing, hey, can we get a deal done? Can we get a deal done? We don't want to fight anymore. They look at the United States and see you're weak. You don't have the backbone to follow through. Let's go. Let's double down. Let's continue to be obstinate. And you see the Iranian regime become more belligerent the more the United States tries to find a way to negotiate and end what's been going on. We're simply saying, hey, no nukes, and you don't control the Strait of Hormuz. That's still international waterway. They say, well, no, we're going to do what we want when we want. And the fact that you're willing to negotiate with us means that you don't have the backbone to fight. We're winning. Despite what you see on the battlefield, we're winning because we're driving up the price of oil, which means we'll drive up the price of gasoline. And you playboys in the West and your big cars and your SUVs and your trucks, you'll come to your knees over gas prices because you're showing weakness right now, meaning you don't have the guts to follow through on this. It's kind of like the stare down before a fight. Whoever blinks first looks like they're going to lose. And that's where I think that's what we're seeing right now when it comes to these negotiations. We're projecting, hey, can we come to a peaceful end? They're receiving, hey, these guys don't want to fight. Now we've got them on the run. Let's really take it to them. And the other part of this, and we're going to talk with Jim Gilmore about this tomorrow. I've said this since the beginning. I think people need to understand. We've always said, boy, you know what? Instead of having politicians, we need a businessman in the White House. And that's what we have. We have a businessman. Businessmen are, by nature, transactional. Transactional meaning I will give you this if you give me that, and they negotiate. That's the art of the deal. Donald Trump is one of the best negotiators, art of the deal, put together so many deals, become very successful in business because he is transactional. And a lot of times it doesn't get personal. It's just, here's the way I'm going to do things. And his way is I'm going to overwhelm you. You're going to cry uncle. I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to ask for something more than I wanted and then give in to you like, okay, fine, we could be friends, and get something lower than I demanded, but that's really what I wanted in the first place. Don Scott, Louise Lucas, the General Assembly does the same thing here in Virginia. They overwhelm you asking for something ridiculous. And then when you say, no, they say, okay, we'll compromise. Instead of this that I never thought I was going to get, I'll settle for this. You go, okay, fine, call off the dogs. We'll give you that. And that's what they wanted in the first place. Donald Trump operates in much the same way. But I think what he's run into is the difference between diplomacy and transactional business. Because the Iranians are not looking for anything transactional. They're a theocracy. They're Muslim fundamentalists. They're not going to negotiate this and get that. They're not going to go quid pro quo. They're not going to go scratch my back and I'll scratch your back. They want something, and there's not much that's going to move them off of that mark. And I think Donald Trump and the administration in the West needs to figure that out sooner rather than later, that it is completely a theocracy. There is diplomacy, and as far as transaction, all right, we'll let you sell your oil. You stop attacking ships. They're not looking for a compromise in any way, shape, or form because of their theocracy. So that's where that art of the deal runs into diplomacy and a theocracy. And right now you're seeing Iran feels like because you're trying to offer them the olive branch, that means you're weak. Therefore, they can pounce on you. Reading the tea leaves completely different than we do in the West. You want to comment, please. 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140. The number for you to join us on the James River Air text line, and the text message is already blowing up this morning here on News Radio WRVA. Program this morning brought to you by our friends at Men's Wellness Centers. All right, guys. I know. You got that little text.